The Empire of Blackmere sat under a low, gray sky, and its stone towers looked cold even in daylight. Far beyond the city walls, the forbidden abyss opened like a wound in the earth, ringed by dead trees and broken black rock. People spoke of that place in quiet voices because no soldier was meant to return from it, and no honest man was meant to be sent there. In the center of all that fear stood Kael, a man with black hair, hard eyes, and a steady face that had once made soldiers feel safe. He had been the Empire's finest war champion, the builder of its frontier fortress, and the reason many border towns still stood. He wanted order, honor, and a home that would last. Then, in one night, everything was taken from him. Lord Victor, a cold man with silver hair and a polished red coat, accused Kael of stealing war maps and opening the eastern gate to enemy raiders. Victor had a clear motive, and it was ugly in a simple way. Kael had become too respected, too useful, and too hard to control. If Kael stayed in power, Victor could never seize command of the Empire Guard, and he could never hide the secret deals he had made with rival nobles. So Victor framed Kael, and the High Council believed him. Kael was stripped of rank, dragged before the people, and thrown into the abyss with a broken chain at his wrists. The crowd shouted, the banners fell, and the life he had built vanished in a single afternoon. The Empire thought that was the end of his story, but it was only the moment before it changed forever. Deep below the world, in the black silence of the abyss, Kael woke among shattered bones and cold wind. The place was not empty. It was full of old power, old hunger, and the marks of forgotten wars. Kael should have broken there, but rage kept him awake, and a strange glow kept pulling him forward through the dark. He found a hidden cavern with walls of ancient white bone, and inside it lay relics no soldier had ever seen. They were not jewels or weapons in the normal way. They were bone rings, bone bands, and a bone mask carved with sharp lines, all old enough to feel alive. When Kael touched them, they did not cut him. They answered him. The relics awakened a rule buried under the earth, a rule that let them change the flow of combat itself. A strike could be redirected at the last moment. A shield could split into a moving wall. A weak step could become a leap through the air. The relics did not make Kael invincible, but they let him rewrite battle if he had the skill and nerve to use them. That was when the living dragon found him. It was small at first, no larger than a wolf, with ember eyes and dark red scales that shimmered like wet stone. It was a spirit beast born from the abyss, and it had been waiting for a human strong enough to share its burden. Kael named him Ember not because the dragon was weak, but because even a tiny flame can survive where the world is cold. Ember did not speak with words, yet Kael understood its hunger, its pride, and its need for freedom. The bond was simple and frightening. If Kael lived, Ember grew. If Kael faltered, Ember suffered. Together they rose from the abyss, and when Kael stepped back into the light, he was no longer the man the Empire had thrown away. Kael returned during a time of unrest when the Empire was already cracking from the inside. Victor had not united the nobles. He had only stirred them against one another because a divided empire was easier to rule. In the north, Commander Sarah, a sharp-eyed woman with blonde hair and a steel-blue cloak, fought to protect her soldiers and keep the border forts from falling into Victor's hands. She had once trained beside Kael, and she wanted the truth because she knew Kael had never been the kind of man who betrayed his own people. In the south, Captain Max, a broad-shouldered man with brown hair and a scar across his chin, still believed the old stories about Kael and wanted revenge for the soldiers lost in the eastern raid. In the capital, Lady Raven, a pale woman with black hair and a silver mask, served as Victor's secret messenger. She cared only about power and survival, and she delivered lies to anyone who would pay for them. As Kael watched the Empire tear itself apart, he made his own choice. He would not hide. He would strike back in the open, and he would use fear, speed, and truth to force every liar into the light. His first attack came at dawn when Victor ambushed him on a mountain pass with 6 riders and 2 mage towers carried on wagons. They expected a broken fugitive. Instead, they found a man who moved through the sky with Ember beneath him, one hand holding the bone mask while the other guided a blade of white fire. Kael used the relics to bend the battle itself. Arrows twisted away from him. One wagon wheel shattered at the wrong moment. A tower spell reversed and blasted Victor's soldiers instead of Kael. Ember flew low, then high, then vanished behind stone before diving back with a roar that sent horses rearing. No one died in the telling of this story, but many were driven back in panic, and the survivors carried one message home with shaking hands. Kael had returned, and he was no longer chasing mercy. His victories grew louder, and so did the danger. Kael shattered a river gate to trap Victor's supply line, then struck a supply fortress and turned its own defense runes against the guards. He forced retreat after retreat, and every loss made Victor more desperate. Yet the deeper Kael pushed, the stranger the pattern became. Documents taken from the fortress did not match the charges used against him, and old seals in Victor camp linked back to the same council members who had condemned him. Kael finally understood the shape of the trap. Victor had not acted alone. The High Council had helped frame him because Kael had discovered a hidden treasury route beneath the Empire, one used to move tribute, weapons, and bribes between the Council, border generals, and outside enemies. If Kael had exposed that route, the entire ruling circle would have collapsed. Victor had chosen to save the system, not just his own place in it. That was the deeper betrayal, and it hit Kael harder than any blade. He had been cast down because he had become a threat to a rotten order that fed on lies. Ember felt the change in him, and the dragon grew restless, circling above Kael's shoulder like a living flame. Kael had gone into the abyss wanting revenge on one man. He came out holding the proof that an entire empire had lied to him, and now every step forward demanded a harsher question. Did he want to burn Blackmere down, or did he want to break it open and force the truth into the light? That choice would decide not only his future, but the fate of every soldier still trapped under Victor rule. Kael stood at the edge of the next battle with the bone relics in his hand, Ember at his side, and the first storm clouds gathering over the Empire. He did not yet know which enemy would fall first, or how much of the world would survive what came next, but he had already crossed the point where turning back was possible. The Empire sat under a heavy sky, and the wind moved cold over broken roads, black stone walls, and watchtowers that never seemed to sleep. Far below those towers, in hidden paths and old stone lanes, fear had become part of daily life because Lord Victor ruled with calm words, locked doors, and soldiers who never asked questions. Kael stood in that restless shadow with worn dark armor, a long black cloak, black hair, and sharp gray eyes that had already seen too much betrayal. He was not a boy chasing a dream. He was a trained commander who wanted one clear thing now, and that was freedom for the soldiers trapped under Victor rule, along with the truth that could tear the Empire open. At his side moved Ember, a young living dragon spirit beast with dark red scales, ember orange eyes, small sharp horns, and wide translucent wings that glowed faintly in the dark. Ember mattered because the creature could sense lies, old magic, and danger before human eyes could. In Kael's hand were the bone relics, a set of ancient white rings, bands, and a carved mask with glowing cracks, all sacred, all dangerous, and all linked to some hidden force inside Victor land. Kael did not yet know if the relics were a key, a weapon, or a trap, but he knew one thing for certain. If he waited, Victor would keep control forever. If he acted, he might save everyone or break the last hope of the rebellion. The first answer came from Commander Sarah, who arrived through the fog with fast, steady steps and a steel blue cloak moving behind her like a banner of duty. She was a woman with blonde hair, clear blue eyes, a fit soldier build, and the kind of face that stayed calm even when fear pressed close. Sarah wanted the same thing Kael wanted, but she saw the danger more clearly than most. She believed the bone relics might reveal hidden passages under the city and show where Victor kept the captured soldiers. Yet she also feared the relics could call something old and uncontrolled from the forbidden abyss, the vast dark pit outside the city where dead trees bent over broken black rock and cold mist never left the ground. That place mattered because Victor had used it for secret trials, secret punishments, and secret storage of power no common soldier was allowed to know about. Sarah led Kael to a ruined signal hall where Captain Max waited with his heavy dark armor, red shoulder guard, battered coat, brown hair, broad build, and a scar across his chin. Max had spent years following orders before he learned those orders were built on lies. Now he wanted revenge on Victor, but more than that, he wanted his soldiers back, because many of them had been sent into the abyss tunnels and never returned to the surface. He slammed one fist onto the old table and told Kael that Victor had sealed a deep prison below Ironhold, and the trapped men were being used to guard something no one had seen in years. That secret, Max said, was the reason Victor kept the army afraid and divided. Lady Raven arrived next, and the room changed the moment she stepped inside. She was a woman with black hair, pale skin, a silver mask, a long black dress, and a hidden dagger belt under her cloak. She carried herself like a noble messenger, but her sharp eyes made it clear she was never only a messenger. She wanted to survive Victor Court, keep her own network alive, and protect a secret source of information that had fed the rebellion from the start. Raven had learned that Victor was not only hunting the bone relics, he was also searching for a missing bone ring that could unlock the full power of the carved mask. That ring, she said, had once belonged to the first wardens of the Abyss, and Victor believed it could help him command the seal under the pit. If he controlled the seal, he could use the Abyss to crush every rebel camp in the Empire. Her words gave the room a new weight, because now the bone relics were not just strange old objects. They were the last pieces of a lock that guarded something far beyond a normal battlefield. Ember curled its tail low and hissed softly, because the dragon spirit could feel the relics answering each other from deep inside the dark metal chest where Kael had hidden them. Kael looked at the pieces, then at the faces around him, and he understood the cost of the next step. He could keep the relics safe and stay hidden, or he could use them now and risk exposing every friend he had left. He chose the path forward, because every second of delay belonged to Victor. They moved at dusk, crossing a broken bridge that led toward the old underground gate beneath Ironhold. The sky above them had turned thick and green-gray, and storm clouds rolled in low and hard, as if the whole Empire was holding its breath. Sarah led the front with quiet precision, Max covered the rear, Raven moved along the side walls with careful grace, and Kael kept Ember close while the bone relics rested in his grip like frozen fire. The tunnel gate was sealed by black iron bars and old runes, and the relics began to glow the moment Kael touched the center ring to the stone. A sharp pulse ran through the hall, and the bars opened with a low groan that sounded almost like a warning. Inside, the air was cold and wet, and the stone passages descended deeper than any city route should have gone. They found signs of recent movement first, then broken chains, then empty armor stands, which meant Victor had moved his guards through here often. Kael also found something worse. Scratched into the wall in rough lines were the names of soldiers from his old unit, followed by dates and marks that showed they had been taken below and never brought back into the light. The sight struck him hard because those names were not numbers. They were men who had laughed with him, eaten with him, and trusted the Empire to protect them. Now he knew Victor had used them as living pieces in a hidden war. The truth sharpened when they reached the first chamber under the gate. At the center stood a stone dais covered in frost, and on it rested a shattered seal ring made of the same bone material as Kael relics. Around the chamber, old warning symbols had been cut deep into the walls, and Ember began to growl, its wings half open and glowing brighter. Sarah read the signs and understood before anyone spoke. Victor had tried to break the Abyss seal from below, not because he feared what was inside, but because he wanted to command it. He had used the missing soldiers as test subjects, forcing them to carry fragments of the seal so he could learn how the relics reacted. That was why the Empire had been growing unstable, why supply lines had failed, and why whole patrols had vanished. Victor wanted control over the Abyss because it would make him untouchable. If he could command that power, no army would dare rise against him again. Max looked ready to rush forward, but Raven caught his arm and pointed to the far wall, where a hidden door stood half open. Inside that door, someone was watching them. Kael stepped closer, relics in hand, and a pale light spilled across the chamber. It was Lord Victor himself, calm as ever, silver hair shining under the torchlight, red noble coat neat as a blade edge, dark gloves folded behind his back, and narrow eyes fixed on Kael like a judge who already expected obedience. Victor smiled, and that smile carried no warmth at all. He said the relics belonged to the Empire, and the Empire belonged to him. Then he made the revelation that changed everything. The soldiers were not trapped only as prisoners. They were being used as anchors to keep the forbidden abyss closed, because if the seal failed too early, something ancient under the pit would wake fully and tear through the Empire. Victor claimed he was the only man strong enough to hold the world together, even if that meant using fear, lies, and sacrifice. Kael stared at him and realized the cruel shape of the truth. Victor had not created the danger, but he had chosen to hide it, exploit it, and build his throne on top of it. The chamber went silent for one thin second, and then Victor raised one hand. From side halls came armored soldiers with dark masks and iron spears, moving in a tight circle to surround the rebels. Kael did not attack in anger. He moved with the clean speed of a commander, sliding the carved mask of the bone relics over his hand and sending a bright pulse across the stone floor. The relics answered him at once. White lines lit the chamber, and the incoming strikes bent away at strange angles, as if the bones themselves had become a wall. Ember rose into the air with a fierce cry, its wings spreading wide and filling the chamber with red light, while Sarah drove the left flank back with disciplined blows and Max broke the right side apart with raw force and unshaken will. Raven vanished into the smoke and reappeared behind one of Victor's guards, cutting the enemy formation apart with quick, precise movement, then slipping away before anyone could catch her. Victor watched it all with cold patience because he had expected resistance. He had prepared for resistance, yet he had not expected the relics to respond so strongly to Kael, and he had not expected the hidden seal to react to Ember presence. The stone under the dais split with a loud crack and a deep dark wind climbed up from below. The chamber lights flickered. The soldiers froze. Even Victor took one step back, and for the first time his calm face lost its perfect shape. Kael felt the pull of the abyss through the relics, and it was not empty hunger. It was a voice, old and patient, pressing against the bone like a hand on thin glass. He understood then that the relics were not built only to seal the abyss. They were built to choose a bearer who could face what waited below without giving in to fear. That was the second truth, and it changed the whole fight. Victor had wanted a weapon. Kael held a test. If he used the relics the wrong way, he might open the seal faster. If he used them with control, he might save the trapped soldiers and expose Victor's lies at the same time. Sarah shouted for him to stay focused. Max held the line at the doorway. Raven called out that Victor was trying to retreat with the seal notes hidden in his coat. Ember turned its glowing eyes toward Kael, and in that look he found trust, not command, but trust. Kael took one deep breath, planted his feet, and forced the relic power outward in a wide pulse that pinned the soldiers in place without harming them. The blast shoved Victor back across the chamber, drove his guards to the wall, and cracked the hidden door behind him. Yet Victor did not fall. He only straightened his coat, lifted his chin, and smiled again because he had already gotten what he came for. In his hand was a second bone fragment, one Kael had not seen until that moment, and on the fragment glowed the mark of the Abyss seal. Victor had taken the final piece earlier, and now the full lock was no longer in Kael control. That was the twist that cut through the room like ice. The battle had not been for the relics alone, it had been for time. Victor wanted Kael to reveal his power so he could measure it, while quietly stealing the last fragment needed to move his own plan forward. The chamber trembled harder, and from somewhere below came a distant roar that shook dust from the ceiling. Victor stepped back into the shadowed doorway and said the Empire was already too late to save. Then he ordered the walls to close and the lower paths to flood with black mist. Sarah tried to follow, but the stone barrier dropped fast, splitting the group from their enemy. Kael reached the opening 1 second too late, and Victor vanished into the dark passage beyond. The rebels were left inside the shaking chamber with the seal cracked, the soldiers uncertain, and the sound of something waking under the forbidden abyss. Kael stood still for a moment, breathing hard, the bone relics burning cold in his hand, while Ember hovered at his shoulder and the others turned to face him. He had not won the day, but he had learned the real shape of the war. Victor was not just a ruler to be overthrown. He was a man racing to control a force that could destroy them all. And now Kael would have to decide whether to chase Victor deeper into the abyss tunnels or rush to warn every rebel camp before the next seal broke. The storm above the Empire had finally broken open, and the dark beneath the world had begun to answer it. The storm had already torn open the night above the Empire, and the rain now fell in hard sheets across broken stone and black mud. Far below, under dead trees and cold mist, the forbidden abyss waited like a wound in the world. Its wide pit swallowed torchlight, its jagged walls held old carvings, and the air around it felt heavy, as if the dark itself was listening. Kael stood at the edge of that ruin with his cloak soaked, his black hair plastered back, his gray eyes fixed and alert. He was a commander who had survived betrayal, and he had learned too much in too little time. Beside him hovered Ember, a living dragon spirit beast with dark red scales, ember orange eyes, small sharp horns, and wide translucent wings that glowed faintly in the dark. Ember was young in shape, but every movement carried fierce strength, and every glare seemed to ask the same question Kael was asking himself. Victor was not just hiding power here. Victor was racing to control it before something far worse broke free. That truth changed everything, because the war was no longer only about the throne. It was now about sealing, surviving, and saving every camp before the next breach. Kael could chase Victor deeper into the abyss tunnels, or he could turn back and warn Sarah, Max, and the scattered rebels. Either choice could cost them dearly, and the wrong one could leave the Empire open to ruin. Then Ember lowered its head and stared into the pit, and Kael felt the first cold answer rising from below. He was not alone for long. Commander Sarah arrived first, her blonde hair wet with rain, her clear blue eyes sharp with worry, and her steel blue cloak snapping behind her as she moved with quick, disciplined steps. She was the kind of leader who never wasted motion, and she cared about every soldier under her command. Captain Max came right after her, broad-shouldered and grim, with brown hair, a scar across his chin, and heavy dark armor that looked scratched by 100 battles. He had the face of a man who wanted answers more than comfort, and he had followed the trail here because too many of his people had already vanished near the tunnels. Last came Lady Raven, a woman with black hair, pale skin, and a silver mask that hid most of her expression. She wore a long black dress and a hidden dagger belt beneath her cloak, and she moved like a secret given human form. Raven did not trust easily, but she had one useful habit. She always knew where dangerous people were going next. The four of them stood together at the pit, and Kael told them the truth in plain words. Victor had been gathering the bone relics, the ancient white rings, bands, and the carved mask with sharp etched lines. These relics could twist the shape of battle and redirect attacks, but they also matched the seals under the Empire. Victor was not collecting weapons for pride alone. He believed the relics could steady the abyss, open it in a controlled way, and let him command the force sleeping below. He wanted order, power, and protection for his rule, but he also feared what would happen if someone reckless opened the seals without him. That fear made him dangerous, because a scared ruler with power often becomes worse than a greedy one. Sarah wanted to warn the rebel camps. Max wanted to strike Victor before he could move again. Raven wanted the truth because she suspected Victor had made a second deal with someone hidden. Kael wanted all of it and none of it, and that was the problem. He could not be in two places at once. Their argument was cut short when the ground trembled under their boots. A low sound rolled up from the abyss, not quite a roar and not quite a groan, but something in between that made even Max take a step back. Ember spread its glowing wings and let out a sharp warning cry. Then the carved stone wall beside the pit cracked open, and a narrow tunnel breathed out cold air so old it smelled like dust and iron. Raven turned her masked face toward the opening and spoke in a flat voice that made the moment feel worse. Victor had not simply vanished. He had gone below through a hidden passage, one that led to the original seal chamber. Sarah immediately said they should return to camp and sound the alarm. Max said they should go after Victor at once because every minute he remained free gave him more time to move the relics. Kael listened to both of them and he saw the truth in pieces. If they left Victor alone, he might complete whatever ritual or machine he had started beneath the world. If they all chased him, then the rebel camps would sit unguarded and Victor could send his forces above while the dark below distracted everyone. Then Raven revealed the next twist. She had intercepted a message carried by one of Victor's first court messengers, and the message was not from Victor to his soldiers. It was from Victor to someone named Silas, a former seal keeper who had once served the Empire and now wanted revenge on both sides. Silas had knowledge of the abyss locks, and Victor had promised him freedom if he guided him to the last chamber. That was the real shape of the betrayal. Victor was not working alone, and he was not only trying to control the abyss. He was using desperate men, stolen relics, and old prison secrets to reach a deeper power hidden beyond the seals. The war had just become larger because now the enemy had allies in the dark. Kael made the first real command of this part of the story, and his voice was steady enough to cut through the fear. Sarah would ride with a fast group to the nearest rebel camps and warn them to move supplies, hide the children, and prepare for attack. Max would take 6 fighters and hold the tunnel entrance above ground, because if Victor sent hunters after them, someone needed to block the path back. Raven would go ahead through the hidden passage and find the route to Silas, because no one else could move through secret halls as silently as she could. Kael and Ember would enter the abyss tunnel and follow Victor before he reached the deeper seal chamber. It was a risky split, but it was the only plan that could save both the camps and the deeper world below. Sarah did not like leaving Kael behind, but she trusted his judgment. Max grunted once and tightened his grip on his weapon, ready for a fight he could not yet see. Raven only adjusted her mask and slipped into the shadows without another word. Then Kael and Ember descended into the tunnel. The walls narrowed quickly and the air grew colder with every step. Strange white markings lined the stone, and each marking looked like a warning written by hands long gone. Ember touched one of them with a claw, and the symbol flickered as if it had been waiting for the dragon's spirit to arrive. That was when Kael understood another important truth. The Abyss did not only react to force, it reacted to bloodlines, oaths, and living spirit power. Ember was not just a companion. Ember was a key, and Victor probably knew it. The thought made Kael move faster because now the danger was not just below them. It was already watching them from the walls. Deeper inside, the tunnel opened into a vast stone chamber with broken pillars, hanging chains, and a floor covered in old dust. On one side stood a huge circular seal set into the ground, cracked but still glowing with pale light. On the other side lay signs of Victor work. Golden tools, white relic fragments, and a map spread across a stone table showed that he had planned every step for a long time. Kael saw claw marks on the far wall and realized something else had been chained here before. Not a person, but a force. The chamber was built to hold it down. That was when Silas appeared from the shadow of a side arch, a thin man with gray hair, sunken eyes, and a robe full of old seal symbols. He looked tired in the way of someone who had lived too long with fear and anger. Silas told Kael that Victor had promised to restore the chamber and make him whole again, but only if he helped break the final lock. Silas had once served the Empire because he believed the seals kept everyone safe. Then he watched the court ignore the warnings and he turned bitter. He was not evil in the simple way Max wanted enemies to be. He was hurt, proud, and ready to make the world pay for not listening. Kael did not have time to answer him because Victor stepped out from behind the broken seal with silver hair cold in the chamber light, his red coat spotless even underground, and his narrow eyes calm in the way only a dangerous man can be calm. He greeted Kael as if they were meeting for a polite discussion, then explained his motive with awful clarity. The Empire was already weakening, and the seals could not hold forever. If the Abyss broke on its own, the first people crushed would be the poor camps, the border villages, and the soldiers sent to die first. Victor believed he alone could guide the opening, shape the release, and stand above the ruins as the only ruler able to bring order afterward. He had convinced himself that control was mercy. Kael heard the lie inside the logic because Victor had wrapped greed in concern and called it duty. Before Kael could answer, Victor raised one hand and the bone relics flared white in the chamber like cold teeth. The fight was sudden, loud, and full of shifting light. Victor used the relic rings and bands to bend the force of Kael's first strike, sending it crashing into a pillar instead of his chest. Ember launched forward with glowing wings, striking the air hard enough to scatter dust and force Victor to shield his eyes. Kael moved with the speed of a trained commander, stepping through broken stone, blocking one attack then another, while trying not to let the chamber collapse around them. Silas rushed to the seal table, torn between helping Victor and stopping the whole disaster he had helped create. For a moment, it seemed as if the chamber itself might win because the old seal began to pulse under the pressure of the relics and the storm above. Then the floor split with a bright line and Kael saw the deeper twist waiting under the chamber stone. The seal was not only holding back power, it was also holding back a buried gate, and Victor had already found the key shape needed to wake it. He wanted not just control, but access. He wanted the next chamber and whatever power lay beyond that chamber. That was the true scale of his ambition. Sarah far above had already reached the nearest rebel camp and sent riders in all directions. Max had blocked the tunnel entrance and forced back the first wave of Victor scouts. Raven had slipped through the side passages and found a secret ledger showing that Victor had moved workers, relics, and prisoners for weeks under false orders. Every piece of the plan was becoming clear, but the danger was rising even faster. In the chamber, Silas finally looked at Victor and realized he had been used. His face changed from anger to shock, then to fear, because Victor never meant to share control with anyone. Victor only needed Silas until the final lock opened. Kael saw that truth in Sila's eyes, and he knew the man might turn at any second. Ember landed beside Kael, body glowing brighter now, and the spirit beast let out a low, steady growl. Together they stood between Victor and the broken seal, while the chamber shook harder and the cold light beneath the floor began to spread. Kael had entered the Abyss to choose between chasing a man and saving a world, but now the choice had changed again. If he won this fight too quickly, the gate might open. If he waited too long, Victor might escape into the deeper dark, and somewhere above them, the rebel camps were still only beginning to hear the warning. The Abyss had started to answer the storm, and everyone was running out of time. The chamber under the world was still shaking when Kael forced himself to stay calm. Cold light spread across the cracked floor in thin lines, and each line looked like a warning that the seal was coming apart one breath at a time. The air was wet, heavy, and full of stone dust, and the deep silence around the chamber made every sound feel larger than life. Kael stood with his black hair falling across his sharp gray eyes, his worn dark armor scratched by old battles, and his long black cloak moving in the wind that rose from the pit below. He was a commander who had survived betrayal, and he had entered the Forbidden Abyss knowing that one wrong choice could doom the rebel camps above. He had come for Lord Victor, a man with silver hair, a cold, polished face, and a red noble coat trimmed in gold, because Victor had chased forbidden power into this place with the calm patience of a thief who believed the world should belong to him. Victor wanted the relic power under the abyss because he believed the ancient seal kept the kingdom weak, and if he could break it first, then he could rule the war, the rebels, and the frightened nobles who had once laughed at him. That was the true conflict now. Kael had to stop Victor, but he could not strike too fast because if the battle ended in the wrong way, the gate beneath the floor might open on its own. A low roar rolled through the dark, and ember burst from the side of the chamber like a living spark pulled from a furnace. Ember was a dragon spirit beast with dark red scales, ember orange eyes, small sharp horns, and translucent wings that shone faintly in the black. The creature looked young in shape, but its presence was old and fierce, like fire that had learned to think. Ember circled over Kael, then snapped its glowing wings wide and sent a wave of heat across the cold floor. The spreading light beneath the stone flared in answer, as if the abyss itself recognized the spirit and hated it. Kael felt that reaction at once, and his mind sharpened. Ember was not only his ally, but also a key to the seal, because the spirit carried a bond to the ancient power below. If Ember pushed too hard, the seal could crack wider. If Ember held back too much, Victor might reach the deeper dark. That balance was now the center of everything. Kael raised one hand to signal Ember to wait, and the creature answered with a tense, angry hiss. Then Victor laughed from the far side of the chamber, where broken black rock formed a ring around a stairway cut into the floor. He was not fleeing yet, he was watching. He wanted Kael to rush, he wanted the seal to fail under pressure. He wanted the abyss to choose chaos for him. Above them, far beyond the broken stone and the dead trees that ringed the pit, the rebel camps were finally hearing the warning. Commander Sarah stood inside a rough supply tent with blonde hair tied back tight, clear blue eyes, a steel blue cloak, and light armor that made her look both disciplined and ready. She had spent the last hour moving from fire to fire, forcing tired soldiers to listen while the storm beat hard against the tarps. Sarah wanted one thing above all else: to keep the rebellion alive long enough to matter. She had seen too many brave people lose hope when danger came too fast, and she refused to let fear split her people apart now. Beside her stood Captain Max, a broad man with brown hair, a scar across his chin, heavy dark armor, and a battered captain coat that looked ready to break at the seams. Max was hard, loud, and angry, but his anger came from duty. He wanted to protect the fighters under his command, and he did not trust Victor for 1 second, because he knew men like Victor always smiled before they betrayed everyone in the room. Lady Raven was there too, a woman with black hair, pale skin, and a sharp, mysterious gaze hidden behind a silver mask. Her long black dress moved like shadow, and the hidden dagger belt under her cloak made it clear that she was never unarmed. Raven was a messenger, but she was also a secret keeper, and she mattered because she knew things about the relics and the seal that no soldier had ever been told. She had promised to guide the others through the dark truth, but even she looked uneasy now because the abyss was not just a place. It was a wound that remembered every force ever used against it. In a smaller tent near the back, Salas sat hunched in a worn dark robe covered in old seal symbols, his gray hair falling over a tired face lined with worry. He had once been a seal keeper, and he knew the rules that the others feared to speak aloud. He said the cold light below the floor meant the seal was waking, not breaking, and that was worse in one way because a waking seal could respond to violence, greed, or fear. He also said Victor must not touch the bone relics together while the chamber was unstable, because the relics would redirect force and could turn any strike into a trigger for the gate. Kael heard none of that directly, but he felt the truth in the trembling stone. Victor stepped forward at last, his dark gloves folded behind his back, his expression smooth and cold, as if the shaking chamber were only a polite inconvenience. In his hand, he carried one of the bone relics, an ancient white ring etched with sharp lines that gave off faint cracks of pale light. Kael had seen relics like that before, and he knew what they could do. They could bend force, twist attack paths, and turn a strong blow into a dangerous echo. Victor lifted the ring and spoke in a soft voice that carried through the chamber. He said the kingdom above had always been weak because it feared old power, and that men like Kael had only delayed the truth. He did not want simple conquest. He wanted proof. He believed that if he proved the seal could be broken and survived, then every lord, rebel, and soldier would bow to the one man bold enough to touch the heart of the abyss. That made him more dangerous than a brute because his greed was wrapped in logic. Kael answered by drawing his blade, but he did not charge. Instead, he moved sideways, placing himself between Victor and the stairway, while Ember hovered higher to block the air above the broken floor. The chamber shook again, harder this time, and a deep crack opened near the center of the ring. Through it came a brighter cold glow, and with it a sound like a massive door shifting in its frame. Then the twist came and it changed everything. Silas, speaking through Raven by a linked signal passed from the camp, revealed the truth that no one had said out loud before. The seal under the abyss was not built to keep one monster in. It was built to keep two opposite forces apart, because if the bone relics and the living spirit of the abyss were forced into the same current, the gate would not open to release a beast. It would open to join the two powers into one broken storm, and that storm would spread through the land above like a curse of endless hunger. Victor had learned this partially, but not fully. He thought he could control the result. In truth, he had been walking into a trap made by history itself. He wanted mastery, but the seal only understood balance. That was why Kael could not simply win. He had to stop Victor without driving the relic power fully into collapse. When Kael understood that, his whole way of fighting changed. He lowered his stance, slowed his breathing, and chose control over anger. Victor sensed the shift and frowned for the first time. Ember sensed it too, and instead of striking wildly, the dragon's spirit spread its wings wide and poured a measured wave of heat across the cracked floor, sealing one broken line while leaving another open. Kael saw the pattern at once. He moved with exact timing, striking the ring from Victor with the flat of his blade instead of the edge, forcing the relic to slide away without triggering its full defense. Victor stumbled back, his polished calm finally broken, and his narrow eyes flashed with real fear. But the battle was not over because the abyss was reacting in layers. The cold light under the floor surged up in a wide pulse, and the chamber walls answered with a deep, grinding hum. Kael realized that Victor had brought two bone relics after all, not one. The second item was hidden under his sleeve, a carved bone mask with sharp etched lines, and he had been waiting for the right moment to place it in the seal circle. Victor had not come only to rule. He had come prepared to offer the abyss a key, hoping to force the ancient power to open for him. That was why he had needed the rebellion and chaos, and why he had wanted the camps above confused and divided. Every delay, every rumor, every false message had been part of the same plan. Kael felt rage rise in him, but he did not let it lead. He remembered the camps above, the frightened soldiers, the people who had trusted him, and he remembered that Sarah was still trying to hold the line. So Kael made the hardest choice of all. He let Victor retreat one step deeper into the chamber, just enough to keep the gate from snapping open, and then he cut off the path behind him by kicking a broken stone wedge into the seal line. Ember followed the move perfectly, driving a bright arc of heat into the gap, and the line cooled into a hard red glow that held the pressure for a moment longer. Victor glared at Kael with open hate now, and for the first time he looked less like a noble and more like a desperate man who had gambled too far. He whispered that this was not the end, because the deeper dark still knew his name. Then the floor behind him opened with a sharp crack, and a stair of black stone appeared below the light, dropping down into a lower level that no one had seen before. Kael froze for one breath, because he knew what that meant. Victor had found the real path, and the next chamber below might hold the true center of the abyss. Above ground, Sarah was still holding the rebel line together. Max was already gathering fighters for a march toward the pit. Raven was sending Silas to prepare the seal tools, and Ember was watching Kael with a fierce, urgent light, ready to follow him anywhere. Kael looked down into the new stairway, then back at Victor, and he understood that the fight had changed again. He had saved the seal for the moment, but he had not ended the danger. Victor had escaped one trap and stepped into another, and the abyss had revealed that it was larger and older than anyone had guessed. Kael tightened his grip on his sword, drew one slow breath, and stepped toward the black stairs without letting himself rush. The cold light under the floor was still spreading, the storm above was still growing, and the next answer waited deeper in the dark. The path forward was open now, but so was the fear, and both of them were calling to the same void. The black stairs disappeared into a cold hollow beneath the ruined floor, and the whole chamber felt like a room that had forgotten the sun. Dust drifted through pale blue light, broken stone lay scattered in sharp pieces, and the air carried a deep silence that seemed to watch every move. Kael stood at the edge with his dark cloak hanging heavy behind him, his black hair still damp from the storm above, and his gray eyes fixed on the steps below. He knew the danger was no longer only Victor. The forbidden abyss itself had become a living problem, and if the wrong seal broke, the whole underworld chamber could open wider than anyone expected. That was the true stake now, not just victory over a man, but the safety of everyone above ground, because the relics buried here could awaken a force that would not stay quiet again. Victor had escaped one trap and stepped into another, but Kael could already see the truth in that mistake. Victor was not running by chance. He was following a plan born from greed, old fear, and a desperate need to break the bond that had been hanging over him for years. Behind Kael, Ember floated low near the broken floor, its dark red scales catching the cold light like embers under ash. The young dragon spirit beast looked small only for a moment, because its orange eyes held a fierce mind that never missed danger. Ember wanted freedom, but it also wanted to protect Kael, and that loyalty had only grown stronger since the abyss first answered its call. A few steps back, Commander Sarah kept her steel blue cloak tight around her armor, her blonde hair tied back so it would not block her clear blue eyes. She was calm in a way that made others trust her, but her jaw was tight now, because she understood that a collapse here would trap her soldiers above and leave no safe path out. Beside her, Captain Max stood with his broad frame planted hard against the stone, his brown hair damp with sweat, his scarred chin set in a hard line. He wanted one thing above all else, to keep his people from falling into this madness, and he had already seen too many good soldiers fail because they hesitated when fear asked for permission. Lady Raven waited near the broken pillar in silence, her black hair hidden beneath her silver mask and dark cloak, her pale face unreadable. She carried secrets as easily as other people carried weapons, and her hidden dagger belt made clear that she trusted no room, no man, and no promise. Then there was Silas, the thin man in the worn dark robe marked with seal symbols, his gray hair messy and his tired eyes haunted by years of keeping forbidden knowledge buried. He mattered because he knew the rules of this place and because he feared the result if anyone ignored them. He had already warned them that the bone relics were not simple treasure. They were prison keys shaped long ago to redirect force, lock paths, and keep the old power from finding a body. If Victor gathered the full set, he could use that hidden rule to break the old binding around the abyss. That was why everyone had come this far, and why none of them could afford a wrong step. Kael started down the black stairs, and each step sounded too loud in the vast dark. The walls around him were smooth in some places and cracked in others, as if the ground itself had been stitched together long ago and then forgotten. Ember drifted beside him, lighting the edges of the stairwell with a warm red glow, while Sarah and Max stayed close enough to guard the rear. Lady Raven moved like a shadow between them, her gaze fixed ahead as if she could already see the shape of the next turn. Silas followed more slowly, one hand touching the wall, his face tightening every time the floor gave a low pulse under their feet. Then the first hidden rule of the abyss became clear. The cold light under the floor was not just spreading. It was reacting. Every time Kael stepped with steady control, the pale glow thinned for a moment. Every time someone rushed, the light flared brighter and sent a wave of chill through the stairwell. Silas spoke in a rough, low voice and told them the chamber was built to answer panic. The old keepers had made it that way on purpose. Fear made people hurry, and haste made the seals unstable. If they rushed, they would help the prison open. That was the ancient rule of this place, and it explained why Victor had not simply charged through. He had learned enough to use the rules, even if he did not care about the cost. Kael slowed his breathing, forced his shoulders loose, and made each step deliberate. That single choice steadied the others, and the light under the floor faded just enough to let them continue. At the bottom of the stairs, they reached a wide hall filled with broken pillars and hanging chains that never touched the ground. In the center stood a circular platform carved with white marks, and across that platform lay the second bone relic set, the rings and bands arranged around a carved mask with sharp etched lines. The relics glowed faintly, not with warmth, but with a pale bone light that looked ancient and wrong. Victor stood on the far side of the platform, his silver hair shining in the dim glow, his red noble coat spotless despite the dirt around him, and his narrow eyes fixed on the relics like a starving man looking at food. He did not turn in surprise when Kael arrived. That calm told the others far more than anger would have. Victor had expected them, he had planned for them, and when he spoke, his voice was smooth, polite, and cruel in its patience. He said he had no wish to destroy the world. He wanted to escape the curse that had bound his family line to the abyss for generations. The court had used the seals to hide the truth, and the truth was simple. Victor had been born into a blood oath tied to the prison below, a binding that slowly drained his strength and made every year of his life feel shorter than the last. The bone relics were the only tools that could separate him from that curse. He had stolen, lied, and trapped others because he believed no one would ever free him by kindness. He wanted control because he was terrified of being controlled forever. That explanation did not make him noble, but it made him understandable, and that was even more dangerous. Kael saw the twist clearly then, because the abyss was not only Victor resting inside it. Victor was also one of its prisoners. Silas confirmed it with a shaking breath. Long ago, the seal keepers had hidden the full truth from the court. The prison under the ground did not only hold a dangerous power, it also held the punishment that kept that power asleep. Victor's family had been tied to the seal as living anchors, and each generation had been taught only enough to obey, never enough to resist. Victor had learned the missing truth too late, and instead of seeking help, he had chosen to tear at the whole structure. That meant his motive was not simple evil. It was fear mixed with pride, and both were now pushing him toward ruin. Before Kael could answer, Victor stepped onto the circle and reached for the carved mask. The bone marks flashed at once, and the hall shook with a hard pulse that sent dust raining from the ceiling. Ember rose sharply, wings spreading wide, and its fire cut through the dark in bright lines. Sarah shouted for everyone to hold their ground, and Max threw his weight forward to shield Silas from falling stone. Lady Raven moved with sudden speed, her cloak whipping behind her as she slipped toward Victor's side, not to save him, but to see what he was hiding. Kael lunged forward, but the relics reacted first. Pale bands lifted into the air and snapped around the chamber like living loops, redirecting force away from the center and toward the walls. The whole room became a trap built from old rules. Every attack turned aside. Every rushed motion made the relics stronger. Victor smiled for the first time because he thought the chamber was finally on his side. Then Lady Raven made the second revelation clear, and it changed the shape of the fight. She removed her silver mask just enough for the others to see the edge of fear in her sharp eyes, and she told them that the relics would not only free Victor. They would also wake the thing below if used without the missing seal phrase. She had learned that from the court records she had stolen and hidden for years, because she had once served the people who wanted this power for themselves. Her mission had not been loyalty to Victor, but surveillance. She had followed him because she believed he might be reckless enough to open the prison, and she was waiting for the chance to stop him or use him. That betrayal was not a surprise to Kael anymore, but her final warning mattered. There was one hidden command, one spoken line that could quiet the relics and force the chamber to obey the keepers again. Silas knew part of it, but not all. He had forgotten some words on purpose because he had feared the day anyone might need them. Now that day had come. The room trembled harder and cracks spread across the platform as Victor pulled the mask toward his face. He was trying to use the relics before anyone could understand them fully. Kael planted his feet, lowered his blade, and called for Silas to speak the first part of the seal phrase. Silas did with a broken voice, and Ember fed a thin line of fire into the white symbols. The relics flared, hesitated, and then bent their force away from Victor for one brief second. That second was all Kael needed. He did not swing with wild anger. He stepped, turned, and struck the platform itself, not to break it, but to split the line of power feeding the mask. The bone light burst upward in a silent flash, and Victor was driven back from the circle, his polished calm finally cracking. The chamber did not fall apart yet, but it was no longer under his command. For a moment, everyone held still, listening to the low tremor under the stone. Victor stood at the edge of the platform, his coat torn at the sleeve, his face pale with furious disbelief. He had not been defeated fully, and he knew it. Kael had not ended the threat either. He had only forced the relics to pause. That was enough to keep the chamber from opening wider, but not enough to solve the deeper problem. Silas leaned on his staff and admitted one final truth. The old prison had more than one lock, and they had just exposed the first. If Victor escaped with even one relic, he could return with a better plan. If the remaining seals failed, the abyss would keep spreading upward, and the storm above would only grow worse. Sarah looked up through the broken ceiling cracks and saw distant lightning crawl across the sky, just as if the storm itself were listening. Max cursed under his breath and tightened his grip, ready for another clash. Ember circled once above Kael, its ember eyes sharp and restless, while Lady Raven watched Victor with cold focus, already judging which side might benefit from the next move. Kael felt the change inside himself then, quiet but real. He had come into the abyss thinking only of stopping an enemy. Now he understood that he was guarding a broken gate, a cursed family line, and a prison built on fear older than the kingdom above. He could not afford to hate Victor as a simple villain anymore, because understanding the enemy was part of surviving him. Kael lifted his sword again, not in triumph but in resolve, and looked toward the deeper dark beyond the broken hall. The next stairway waited there, hidden behind the trembling wall, and whatever slept below had not yet shown its final shape. The path forward was still open, the fear was still alive, and Kael stepped toward both with steady breath, knowing this night was only getting darker. The hidden stairway waited behind the trembling wall, and the fortress around it felt alive with fear. Cold air leaked upward from the cracks, carrying the smell of wet stone, old dust, and something far older than the castle above. Kael moved first, his black hair damp with sweat, his worn dark armor scraped and bent, and his long black cloak dragging behind him like a shadow that refused to leave. He did not move like a man looking for glory. He moved like a commander who had learned that every step could decide who saw the morning. Behind him came Commander Sarah, a woman with blonde hair tied back tight, clear blue eyes, and a fit soldier build that made her look calm even when her hands were clenched around her weapon. Captain Max followed close, a broad man with brown hair, a scar across his chin, and a hard stare that never left the dark. Ember floated near Kael's shoulder height, a living dragon spirit beast with dark red scales, ember orange eyes, small sharp horns, and faint glowing wings that lit the stone in short pulses. Lady Raven moved in silence at the rear, a woman with black hair, pale skin, a silver mask, and a black dress layered for speed, her hidden dagger belt ready under her cloak. Silas came last, thin and tired, his gray hair hanging over his sunken eyes, his worn dark robe covered in old seal symbols. He knew what waited below, and that knowledge made his face look older than before. Victor had pushed them to this point by using fear, the bone relics, and the sealed power of the forbidden abyss, and if they failed now, the whole fortress could become a gate for something that should never wake. Kael reached the wall first and placed his hand against the stone. The surface trembled under his palm as if something on the other side could feel him too. Silas stepped forward at once, his tired eyes fixed on the cracked line in the wall. He spoke in a low voice and told them that this was not a normal secret passage. He explained that the hidden stairway had once been built by the first seal keepers to reach the chamber under the fortress, where the forbidden abyss pressed against the world like a wound. Long ago, the seal keepers used the stairway to feed power into the seals, but they also knew the stairs could be used to weaken the prison if the wrong person found them. Victor had found them. Worse, Victor had not just found the path. He had studied the rules. He knew the bone relics could bend force, redirect strikes, and twist the flow of an attack, which was why his soldiers had seemed so hard to break. He was not simply trying to win a battle. He was trying to control the fight itself by turning the old seal rules into weapons. Sarah listened with a tight jaw and then asked the question that had been burning in every mind. Why would Victor want the abyss if it was so dangerous? Silas answered with a slow nod. Victor did not want the abyss because he loved darkness. He wanted it because the sealed power below could overwhelm armies, break defenses, and leave any ruler who held it with impossible leverage over every lord in the land. That meant cities could be forced to kneel, not by open war, but by the threat of collapse from below. Kael understood then that Victor was building a kingdom out of fear, one layer at a time. The wall gave a sudden groan, and a narrow seam opened where Kael had pressed. Ember hissed softly and flared brighter, casting orange light over the stone. Max pulled the broken debris aside, and the hidden stairway appeared, dropping into darkness in a sharp spiral. The air that came up from below was colder than winter water, and every breath felt heavy. Lady Raven leaned forward and stared into the black opening. Her silver mask hid most of her face, but her sharp gaze said enough. She warned them that the stairway was a trap if Victor had already placed guards below. Sarah answered that every path in this fortress was a trap by now, but they could not stop moving. Kael led the way down. The steps were narrow, wet, and slick with old mineral dust, and the walls were marked with faded seal symbols carved by hands that had long since turned to history. As they descended, the sounds of the broken hall faded above them, replaced by a low humming that came from deep below. It was not a voice, but it felt close to one. Silas whispered that the abyss always made a sound when it was disturbed, as if something inside it were waking up and remembering the shape of hunger. That made Max grip his weapon harder because he had spent too many years in war to trust a sound like that. Kael kept his eyes forward and said nothing. He was listening for the rhythm of Victor, not just the man, but the pattern of his choices. If Victor thought like a strategist, then Kael needed to think like one too. Halfway down the stairway, they found the first sign that Victor had been there recently. On one wall sat a ring of broken bone fragments, white and dull in the dark, arranged in a careful pattern around a red scratch mark. Silas stopped and looked away at once. He explained that the bone relics did not work alone. They needed placement, focus, and a clear intent. Victor had been using them to prepare the chamber below for a larger ritual, one meant to spread the seal apart just enough to let the abyss answer him without fully breaking free. Kael crouched near the fragments and saw a smear of ash at the center. It was not a random mark, it was a signal. Victor had left it on purpose. Sarah noticed it too and said he wanted them to know he was ahead. That was the twist in the trap. Victor was not hiding, he was guiding them. He wanted Kael and the others to reach the lower chamber because he needed them close to the ritual zone, where their anger, their fear, and their resistance could all be used against them. Lady Raven spoke next, her voice calm and flat, and she said that Victor always preferred a battle with rules he could predict. If the heroes rushed, he would trap them. If they paused, he would finish his setup. Kael felt a cold understanding settle in his chest. Victor was not just a cruel noble with a polished face and silver hair. He was a man who believed every person had a place in his design. If that was true, then the only way to beat him was to break his design without losing themselves in the process. Ember drifted closer to Kael and pressed its glowing head near his shoulder, sending a small wave of heat through his armor. The spirit beast did not speak in words, but Kael felt the warning clearly. The dark below was getting stronger, and it was reacting to their arrival. Then the stairway ended, and the team reached a huge iron door sealed with old chains and carved bone locks. The door stood at the edge of a chamber so large that the weak light did not reach the far walls. Across the floor lay broken black rock, dead roots, and thin streams of cold mist. In the center of that chamber stood Victor. His silver hair caught the dim light, and his pale face looked almost peaceful, which made him far more dangerous than a shouting enemy. He wore his red noble coat with gold trim, dark gloves, and a high collar, and beside him rested a polished table holding the bone relics, each piece glowing faintly through cracked white lines. He did not look surprised to see them. He looked relieved, as if the final piece of a plan had arrived exactly on time. Victor addressed Kael with perfect calm and said that understanding had finally made him useful. He explained in that same measured voice that he had spent years studying the abyss because the world above was built on fragile promises. Kings lied, soldiers broke, and seals decayed, but fear, when used well, lasted longer than loyalty. He wanted the abyss not to destroy the world, but to make the world impossible to challenge. He believed that if every army feared the same power, then no kingdom would dare rise against him again. Sarah stepped forward in anger and called it madness. Victor answered that it was order. Max raised his weapon, but Silas stopped him with one shaking hand. The old seal keeper said the chamber was already active and any sudden clash could trigger the relics. Kael saw the truth in the air itself. Thin lines of pale light ran from the relic table into the floor, and each line led toward the iron door behind Victor. Something was behind that door, something that had begun to answer his control. Kael took one slow step forward, and Victor smiled as if that was exactly what he wanted. Then the chamber changed. The bone relics flashed, the chains on the iron door shuddered, and the floor sent a deep pulse through everyone standing there. Ember spread its glowing wings and pushed light across the room, revealing more seal marks carved into the black stone. They formed a circle that had been damaged on purpose. Silas looked horrified and shouted that Victor had not merely found the old seal chamber. He had broken the final support on purpose to force the abyss into a choice. Either it would remain contained and weaken itself, or it would push power through the cracks and become easier for Victor to command. That was the true trap. Victor had brought them here to serve as pressure against the seal. Kael now understood why Victor had allowed the earlier fight to drag on so long. Every clash had been part of the preparation. Every retreat, every broken wall, every wounded soldier, every moment of fear had fed the chamber below. Victor wanted the heroes close because their resistance could complete the pattern if he controlled the timing. For the first time, Kael saw the scale of the enemy in full. Victor was not just one man in a red coat. He was a planner who could turn panic into fuel. Kael lifted his sword and did not rush. He looked at Sarah, Max, Raven, Ember, and Silas, and each of them understood without a word. They were not here to win quickly. They were here to stop the chamber from deciding the future for them. Victor raised one gloved hand, and the iron door behind him began to crack open by itself. From the dark beyond, it came a low, deep breath, slow and huge, as if the abyss had noticed the world again. Kael tightened his grip, the others took their places, and the chamber filled with the quiet moment right before a greater storm. The next move would decide more than a fight. It would decide whether the hidden thing below ever learned how to rise. The chamber below the fortress felt colder than the world above, and the air carried a heavy silence that seemed to press against every chest. Broken stone walls leaned inward, black dust covered the floor, and the wide opening of the iron door behind Victor looked like a mouth that had not tasted light for ages. Kael stood near the center with his worn black cloak hanging still behind him, his black hair damp with sweat, his gray eyes locked on the opening. Commander Sarah, a woman with blonde hair and clear blue eyes, held her steel blue cloak close as she measured the room with calm soldier focus. Captain Max, a broad man with brown hair and a scar across his chin, planted his boots like he meant to hold the line no matter what came next. Lady Raven, a woman with black hair and a silver mask, kept one hand near the hidden dagger belt beneath her dark dress, while Silas, a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes, clutched his seal-marked robe with trembling fingers. Ember hovered near Kael like a living flame made real, its dark red scales and ember-orange eyes glowing in the dark. All of them knew the same truth now. If Victor finished opening the way, the thing below would not stay hidden. It would rise, and the seals that guarded the land would begin to fail one by one. Victor stood before the door with a calm face that made the danger feel even worse. His silver hair shone under the weak light, and his polished red coat with gold trim looked too clean for such a rotten place. He lifted one dark gloved hand, and the iron door answered him like a servant that had waited too long for a master. Thick metal split with a slow grinding sound, and a breath of cold air rolled out from the darkness beyond. It was not the breath of a man or beast. It was deep, slow, and huge, like the whole underground world had finally remembered how to wake. Victor did not turn away. Instead, his narrow eyes gleamed with quiet hunger, because he believed the abyss held power that should belong to the one bold enough to claim it. He wanted control, not for battle, but for rule. He wanted the old force below because he believed fear made the strongest kingdom, and he had spent years waiting for a chance to bend that force to his will. That was why he had followed the group into ruins, lied to allies, and pushed every seal toward breaking. He was not opening a prison by accident, he was opening a gate on purpose. Silas understood that at once, and his face went pale. The old seal keeper had spent his life guarding the chamber records, and now he saw the shape of his greatest fear. The seals were never meant to only lock something away, they were also meant to keep Victor from reaching it. Kael took one careful step forward, and the others moved with him as if the whole chamber had agreed to breathe only when he did. He had begun this journey as a commander who trusted action more than hope, but now his thoughts moved in a sharper way. He saw how Victor had waited for fear to spread, how he had let everyone believe the chamber itself was the enemy, and how he used silence like a weapon. Kael knew that if he rushed too soon, the opening door could finish breaking on its own. If he waited too long, whatever breathed on the other side might awaken fully. So he did what a true commander had to do. He spoke clearly, and he gave each person a purpose. He told Sarah to guard the left side and watch for any shift in the stone. He told Max to hold the center and stop Victor if he moved again. He told Raven to circle wide and look for another seal control, because someone like Victor rarely acted without a second path. Ember lowered its head and let out a low ember sound, ready to strike if the dark pressed too close. Then Kael looked at Silas and asked the one question that mattered most. He asked what the chamber was really hiding. Silas swallowed hard, and his tired voice finally carried the truth. Long ago, he said, the elders had not sealed away a monster alone. They had sealed away a living will, an ancient force from the forbidden abyss that could not fully enter the world unless a human hand opened the final door. That was why Victor mattered so much. The abyss wanted a willing guide, and Victor wanted the power that the abyss could give back. The danger was worse than anyone had guessed, because once the thing below accepted a guide, it could learn the shape of the surface world. Then every lock built after it would start to fail. Before anyone could answer, the darkness beyond the door pushed outward in a slow wave, and the chamber shook with a deep pulse that made dust fall from the ceiling. The iron edges bent farther, and the black space behind them widened into a tall, broken tunnel lined with old stone ribs. From that dark, a shape moved, not fully seen, but enough to make the skin tighten on every arm in the room. It was not a full body, not yet, but a vast presence that seemed to breathe through the cracks in the world. Victor smiled for the first time, and that small smile was more disturbing than any shout. He spread his hands as if greeting a long-lost ally, and he spoke to the dark with the confidence of a man who thought he had already won. Ember answered with a fierce flare of orange light, spreading its wide, translucent wings and filling the chamber with a glow that pushed back the shadow around Kael. The dragon's spirit did not fear the abyss. It sensed it, judged it, and stood between it and the others like a blade made of fire and shadow. Sarah shouted for everyone to brace, and Max slammed his shield arm against the stone to steady his position as the floor trembled again. Lady Raven moved like a streak through the side path, her black hair whipping behind her as she searched for hidden levers or secret marks, because she knew Victor would never trust only one opening. Kael advanced one more step, and this time he saw the true pattern in the cracked door. The bone-white relic marks on the frame were not simply locks. They were a ring of pressure points, built to answer only to the ancient bone items that Silas had hidden long ago. The rings, bands, and carved mask were not made to fight the abyss. They were made to shape its path. That was the twist that changed everything. The relics were not weapons first. They were tools for guiding the seal, and if used wrong, they could either trap the darkness forever or help it rise in a new form. Victor had known that, and he had spent all this time searching for the missing pieces. Now the reason for his patience became clear to everyone at once. He had not wanted a battle, he had wanted access. The chamber erupted into motion. Victor threw his hand outward, and a sharp force of dark pressure hit the floor near Max, forcing him back half a step but not breaking his stance. Sarah moved in at once, her blade arm raised, and she drove the attack away before it could reach Kael. Raven slipped across the broken stones and found a hidden bone slot set into the wall, but it was empty, and that empty space told her the final relic was still missing. Silas suddenly remembered where he had hidden it years ago, not in the fortress, but in a sealed storage crypt beneath the old river road, far from Victor, because he had feared this exact night. That memory landed like a hard blow. The last relic had been hidden not out of carelessness, but out of terror. Silas had known Victor would come for it if he ever learned the truth, and he had chosen secrecy over safety. Kael felt both anger and respect rise at once, because the old man had made a hard choice in a hard age. Yet there was no time to dwell on it. The presence beyond the door was growing stronger, and the chamber walls began to show thin lines of pale light, as if the seals were waking in pain. Ember soared upward, its wings cutting through the dark, and its flame light revealed the far side of the tunnel where a second shadow moved behind the first. Victor saw that too, and for the first time his face changed. He had expected one force below, but the chamber seemed to hold more than one path of danger. That was when the low breath from the dark turned into a deeper sound, and the opening in the iron door widened just enough for a giant eye shape to glow faintly inside. Kael raised his weapon and felt the weight of the next choice settle over him. He could hold this line and keep the chamber from deciding the future for them, but the cost would be high, and the missing relic still waited somewhere beyond the fortress walls. As the dark pressed closer and Victor stepped back into the shifting shadow, Kael knew this fight was only the beginning of what the abyss had planned. The fortress hall felt colder after the iron door began to open, and every stone around Kael seemed to hold its breath. The narrow crack in the metal now showed a faint shape inside, like a giant eye made of pale light, and that sight turned fear into something sharper. Kael stood in worn dark armor with his black cloak hanging heavy behind him, his black hair wet with sweat, his gray eyes fixed forward, and his weapon raised in both hands. He knew this was not just another attack. If the chamber opened fully, the force sleeping beyond it could reach the whole fortress, and if Victor gained control first, the missing relic outside the walls would become a key to something far worse. The danger was clear, and the cost of failure was no longer a warning. It was right there in front of them. Lord Victor stepped back into the shifting shadow with the calm of a man who believed every room would eventually obey him. He had silver hair, pale skin, narrow eyes, and a polished face that never showed panic, even now. His red noble coat with gold trim looked almost clean in the dark, and his dark gloves moved with slow confidence as he watched the door. Victor wanted the bone relics because he believed old power could be measured, owned, and directed like an army. He wanted the hidden relic beyond the walls because Silas had once told him it could unlock the larger seal beneath the fortress. Victor did not care what the abyss was meant to be. He only cared that it could make him untouchable, and he thought that was worth any risk. Behind Kael, Commander Sarah tightened her grip on her blade, her blonde hair pulled back, her blue eyes hard with focus, her steel blue cloak shifting around her light armor. She was the kind of leader who stayed steady when others shook, and she cared because every soldier in the hall had trusted her to bring them home. Beside her, Captain Max planted his broad frame in front of the broken line, his brown hair damp, his scarred chin tight, and his hard stare full of anger. He wanted Victor stopped because he had seen what greedy orders did to good people. Near the side wall, Lady Raven stood silent in her black dress and silver mask, her black hair falling straight around her shoulders. She moved like a secret with a dagger belt hidden under her cloak, and she cared because she had spent years carrying messages between noble houses that lied to each other with smiles. At her feet, Ember crouched low, its dark red scales catching the light, its ember orange eyes bright and alert, its small horns sharp against the gloom, and its translucent wings glowing like trapped fire. The dragon spirit beast was young in form but ancient in purpose, and it wanted the relic recovered because the abyss had already wounded its kind in ways no human had fully understood. Silas stood farther back, almost hidden by the broken seal pillars, and he looked like a man who had carried fear for too many years. He was thin, with gray hair, sunken eyes, and a worn dark robe covered in old seal symbols. His hands shook, but his voice still mattered because he knew the fortress better than anyone alive. He had once been a seal keeper, and he had guarded the rules of the chamber before Victor ever began hunting power. Silas had seen enough to know the truth, and now he finally said it in a rough whisper that carried through the hall. The giant eye in the door was not a beast waiting to attack. It was the awareness of the abyss itself, testing the weakness of the seal. It could not simply be broken open without calling attention to everything below it. That was why the old keepers had hidden the bone relics and split the larger key into parts. The relics were not weapons in the usual sense. They were control pieces, each one meant to redirect pressure, bend force, and protect the barrier from inside and outside at the same time. If Victor gathered them all and used them with greed instead of care, he would not command the abyss. He would invite it to answer him, and once it answered, the fortress would no longer belong to anyone. The door groaned again, and the light inside widened into a trembling oval. A low sound rolled out of the crack, deep and steady, like the chamber had begun to wake from a long sleep. Kael felt the air press against his chest, but he also felt something else, a pull from the missing relic beyond the walls, like the rest of a broken chain calling for its last piece. That was the first twist, clear and terrible. The relic Victor wanted was not just treasure. It was part of the same seal network as the chamber door, and if it stayed hidden, the seal would weaken over time. If Victor found it first, he could force the seal open. If Kael found it first, he might still have a chance to close the breach before the abyss spread any farther. The truth changed everything. This was no longer a simple battle against a greedy noble. It was a race against a system that was already failing. Kael lowered his stance and gave a short command, and the others moved at once. Commander Sarah pulled 2 soldiers back from the center line and sent them toward the side supports, where cracked chains held up a broken beam. Captain Max slammed his shoulder into a fallen slab and shoved it into place to block the direct path. Lady Raven slipped into the shadows near the wall, her masked face turning toward the hall exits, ready to catch any hidden move from Victor. Ember rose from the floor in a sudden glow, its wings spreading wide as a warm red light cut through the dark. The dragon spirit beast did not attack blindly. It circled the iron door, sensing the strange pressure and looking for weak points in the seal. Silas, still shaking, opened a sealed pouch and pulled out 3 bone pieces wrapped in cloth. One was a ring, one was a band, and one was a carved mask with sharp etched lines. The bone relics looked ancient and sacred, but they also felt dangerous, like tools made for a rule no one should ever forget. Silas placed the ring into Kael's hand and told him the relics had to be matched to the wall sigils before the door could be stabilized. Kael saw at once why Victor had wanted them. With the right hand guiding them, they could redirect the chamber force. With the wrong hand, they could turn the whole fortress into an open gate. Victor smiled when he saw the relic pieces, and that smile carried the worst kind of honesty. He did not hide his goal now. He said the world was already ruled by fear, so a ruler should simply take the thing everyone feared and master it. He said the old seal keepers were weak because they chose restraint over power. He said Kael was wasting strength protecting a broken age. Then Victor lifted one gloved hand and signaled from the shadow behind him. Two silent attendants in dark travel cloaks dragged forward a heavy iron frame, and Kael recognized it at once as a relic cage meant to trap spirit force. Victor had prepared for this moment long before the door ever opened. That reveal struck hard because it proved he had not stumbled into the fortress by chance. He had studied the seal, bought information, and arranged the entire crisis to force the relics into his reach. That made him more dangerous than an angry noble. It made him patient. The hall erupted into motion. One of Victor's men swung a hooked blade toward Captain Max, but Max caught the attack on his armored forearm and drove the man back with a brutal shove. Commander Sarah crossed blades with another attacker, her movements clean and controlled, each step protecting the soldiers behind her. Lady Raven appeared from the shadows long enough to trip a guard and steal the iron key from his belt, then vanished again before he could call out. Ember launched forward in a spiral of firelight, slamming its glowing body against the relic cage and cracking one of its side bars. The impact shook the floor and the cage lost part of its hold. Kael moved straight for the door because he could feel the giant eye inside growing brighter, as if it had noticed the fighting and found it interesting. He pressed the bone ring against the nearest wall sigil, and the carved lines on the stone answered with a pale flash. Silas shouted the next step, telling him to place the band at the lower mark and the mask at the center point. Kael obeyed without hesitation. For a brief second, the chamber pressure shifted and the glowing eye inside the door narrowed as if something had been forced to blink. That small victory came with a heavy price because Victor saw exactly where the relic network was strongest. He drove forward through the chaos and reached for the mask of bone before Kael could secure it. Their hands nearly touched as the relic shimmered between them, and the entire hall shook with the clash of their wills. Kael did not have the strength to overpower Victor alone, but he was no longer alone. Sarah stepped in from the side and slammed her blade hilt into Victor's wrist, breaking his grip just enough. Max then crashed into Victor with raw force, forcing him back into a pillar. Victor stumbled, but only for a moment, and the cold look in his eyes changed into open fury. He had lost control of the center, and he hated that more than the pain. Then the giant eye in the iron door opened a little wider, and a wave of dark pressure rolled out. The soldiers near the hall entrance stumbled, one dropping to one knee, another clutching the wall for balance. Ember spread its wings and took the pressure head-on, glowing brighter, as if it were trying to shield the others with its own spirit fire. Silas finally confessed the last secret, and it changed the meaning of everything before it. Years ago, he had helped hide the missing relic beyond the fortress walls, not because he feared thieves, but because the relic had once reacted to Victor's bloodline. The old seal keepers had learned that Victor's family line could touch abyssal force without being burned by it, which was exactly why the relic had to be separated and hidden. Victor froze for only a breath when he heard that, and that silence told Kael the truth was real. Victor was not just a greedy lord. He was a man who had spent his whole life believing he had a birthright to command forbidden power, and the hiding of the relic had felt to him like an insult that needed correction. That was why he had hunted so hard, bribed so many people, and pushed so far into danger. He did not just want the relic. He wanted to prove that the old seal keepers had no right to deny him. Kael understood the full shape of the conflict now, and that understanding became the turning point inside him. He had begun this fight as a soldier trying to hold a line, but now he saw that holding a line was not enough. He had to protect a truth that was bigger than his own strength. He had to choose trust over pride and duty over fear. So he looked at Sarah, Max, Raven, Ember, and Silas, and each of them answered in their own way. Sarah nodded once and moved the remaining soldiers into a tighter ring around the relic marks. Max planted himself between Victor and the door, ready to absorb another charge. Raven slipped away toward the outer stair, likely heading to warn the rest of the fortress that the attack was no longer contained. Ember circled Kael one more time, then settled low as if ready to lend him its heat. Saylas, trembling but determined, pointed toward a hidden channel beneath the floor where the seal force could be redirected if they could survive long enough to use it. Kael stepped to the center mark, pressed the bone mask into place, and felt a sharp pulse race through the wall. The iron door reacted at once, not opening wider this time, but locking in place with a deep metallic groan. The giant eye inside flickered, then sharpened, as if it had finally noticed Kael as a real threat. Victor pulled himself free from Max and slowly smiled again, but now the smile looked strained and angry. He said the fortress had already chosen sides and he would return with the missing relic before the night was over. Then he vanished backward into the shifting shadow, carrying 2 of his attendants with him as they retreated through a hidden route Kael had not seen before. His voice lingered in the hall for one last promise, cold and calm, saying that the abyss always answered the one bold enough to call it. The threat did not end there because the door stayed active, the eye stayed awake, and the relic network still hummed beneath Kael's feet. Yet the line had held for now. The hall was not lost. The fortress still stood. Kael looked around at the battered faces beside him, and something in him changed. He was no longer only the commander who reacted to betrayal. He had become the one who could gather broken people, trust them, and keep moving even when the dark refused to back down. The victory was small, but it was real. And somewhere beyond the walls, where the missing relic waited in the cold night, the next part of Victor's plan was already beginning. Night had settled over the fortress like a heavy cloak, and the broken walls still held against the cold wind. Torches burned along the stone paths, throwing long shadows across damaged armor, bent spears, and cracked shields. The air smelled of smoke, steel, and tired breath, but the fortress still stood, and that fact mattered more than pride. Kael moved through the courtyard with black hair falling across his sharp gray eyes, his dark armor scratched and worn, his long black cloak torn from battle and travel. He looked at the soldiers who had survived, and he saw more than fighters. He saw fear, pain, and the need for someone to keep them moving. The central problem was clear now. Lord Victor was still out there, still hunting the missing relic, and if he reached it first, he could use the power of the bone relics to force open the forbidden abyss and take control of everything sealed beneath it. That would not only break the fortress, but it could also spread danger across the whole region. Kael understood that the next move had to be smart, because one more mistake could leave everyone exposed. Beside him, Commander Sarah stood with her blonde hair tied back, her blue eyes steady even as exhaustion showed on her face. She wore a steel blue cloak over light armor, and she had the calm, disciplined presence of a soldier who knew how to keep order when panic wanted to win. Captain Max came next, a broad man with brown hair, a scar across his chin, and a hard stare that never seemed to soften. He carried heavy dark armor and a red shoulder guard, and he wanted one thing above all else now, to make sure no enemy ever reached the fortress again. Ember, the living dragon spirit beast with dark red scales and ember orange eyes, circled above the courtyard in a slow, watchful pass. Its translucent wings caught the torchlight and glowed faintly, and though its shape was youthful, its presence was old and fierce. Ember sensed danger in places no human could see, and that made it matter more than any scout. Then Lady Raven arrived from the inner gate, a woman with black hair, pale skin, and a sharp, mysterious gaze hidden behind a silver mask. Her long black dress moved like smoke, and the hidden dagger belt beneath her cloak reminded everyone that she was never simply a messenger. She had brought warning before, but no one yet knew whether she could be fully trusted. Finally, Sela stepped from the shadows, thin and tired, with gray hair and sunken eyes. His worn dark robe was covered in seal symbols, and his hands shook slightly as he carried the burden of old knowledge. He had once guarded the seals that held the dark below, and now he knew that the seal was weakening because someone had stolen part of its binding pattern years ago. He did not say Victor had done it at first, but the look in his eyes made Kael fear the answer. Silas said the missing relic was not just valuable. It was the final bone key that could lock or unlock the old seal, and if Victor used it with the other bone relics, the barrier beneath the fortress would weaken fast. Kael felt the weight of that truth settle into his chest, because this was no longer only about survival. It was about choosing who would hold the future open and who would be shut out by force. Inside the war chamber, the group gathered around a broken stone map under dim lantern light. Sarah pointed to the western road, where fresh tracks had been found near the outer gate. Max said the enemy had likely sent a hidden team to search the old burial path, because Victor always liked to move through forgotten places where people would not look. Raven confirmed that she had seen one of Victor's riders leave the camp before dawn, carrying a black case wrapped in plain cloth, and she admitted that the rider had spoken to her first because Victor believed she still worked for him. That confession hit like a sharp blow, but she did not hide from it. She explained that she had once served as a court messenger in Victor's house, and she had learned his true nature only after seeing him trade loyalty for power without blinking. She now wanted Victor stopped because his hunger would ruin every place he touched, including the courts, the roads, and the people who still believed his polite face. Kael listened without interrupting because he had learned that leadership began with hearing the truth, even when the truth hurt. Ember landed near the table and lowered its head toward the map, then breathed a warm burst of light over one mark near the old stone pit outside the eastern trees. Silas went pale and said that mark matched an entrance to the forbidden abyss. He explained that the abyss was not simply a hole in the ground, but a sealed ruin of black rock and dead trees where ancient force had once been buried because no ruler could control it. Long ago, the bone relics had been made by seal keepers to redirect power away from that pit, and Victor now wanted them because he believed the abyss held a source strong enough to remake his rule. He did not want to destroy the world. He wanted to own the danger and command fear itself. That motive made him even worse because it was careful, cold, and logical. Sarah asked the hard question out loud. If Victor got the relic first, could the fortress be opened from below? Silas answered yes, and that answer made the room go silent. Then Kael made his choice. He would not wait inside stone walls while Victor arranged the next trap. He would lead a small team to the old burial path, find the relic, and cut off Victor before the enemy could join the missing piece to the others. Max insisted on going because his anger could help where fear might freeze others. Sarah also chose to go because she knew the land and the soldiers and because someone had to keep the plan clean. Raven offered to guide them through hidden paths and Kael accepted, even while keeping one eye on her. Silas said he would come too because only he knew the old seal signs well enough to recognize Victor's tricks. Ember would fly overhead and watch for movement. It was a fragile team built from bruised trust, but it was the first real shape of hope Kael had seen since the betrayal began. They left before full midnight, moving through a narrow path of black trees and broken stone. The world beyond the fortress looked dead and quiet, but Ember kept circling above in short, low passes, its orange eyes cutting through mist. Sarah led with careful steps, reading marks in the ground and calling out the places where the path could split. Max carried a heavy blade and checked every shadow as if he wanted it to challenge him. Raven moved with silent confidence, her silver mask catching faint moonlight whenever she turned her head. Kael watched her closely, yet he also noticed how she kept looking back toward the others as if she wanted them to survive as much as he did. That was the first small sign that trust might be possible. Then the team found the burial path where old stone posts rose from the dirt like worn teeth. The air turned colder there and Silas said the seals were thinning. He pointed to broken rings carved into the ground, ancient marks meant to keep the abyss asleep. Each ring had been scratched by something heavy and deliberate, and that meant someone had come here before them. Not long after, Ember gave a sharp cry and landed hard on a stone outcrop. Through the trees ahead, Kael saw lantern light moving in a slow circle. Victor had sent a second group to guard the relic site. The enemy soldiers wore dark cloaks and plain helms, and they were not many, but they were organized. Their captain was not present, which meant the real enemy had planned to let the trap do the work. Kael raised his hand and the team spread out. Sarah signaled left, Max moved right. Raven vanished into the dark with the ease of a shadow. Silas stayed behind Kael, whispering old seal words to keep the root from collapsing under them. Then the clash began. It was fast, sharp, and silent at first, with steel striking wood and boots sliding in wet dirt. Kael moved like a commander made for the front line, guiding each strike and step so the enemy could not surround them. Max broke the first guard line with raw force. Sarah caught another attack and drove the foe back with a clean shield turn. Raven appeared behind a watcher, took the map from his belt, and sent him stumbling away without making a sound. Ember swept low overhead and blasted a wave of heat across the path, not to burn, but to force the enemy line apart. Yet the real problem was deeper. As the fighting shifted, Silas shouted that the stone rings were waking and the ground began to tremble. A hidden seal beneath the path had been damaged by the missing relic, and Victor had known it would fail at exactly this place. The enemy had not come only to guard the route. They had come to make Kael and his team stand on the broken seal while the old power stirred below. Kael understood the trap too late, but not too late to act. He ordered everyone back from the center ring, then he ran straight toward the buried mark Silas had pointed out. In the dirt half covered by roots, he saw a white bone band glowing faintly with cracks of pale light. It was one of the bone relics left here as bait. The sight made the truth snap into place. Victor had hidden the relic here on purpose, knowing Kael would feel forced to take it before the enemy did. But if he touched it the wrong way, the ring would feed the broken seal and turn the path into a collapse point. Victor did not need Kael to fail by weakness. He needed him to fail by duty. That was the twist, clear and cruel. The enemy was not simply trying to win a battle. Victor was shaping every choice so that even a good decision could hurt the fortress. Kael reached for the bone band, then stopped when Silas shouted for him to listen. The old seal keeper explained in a strained voice that the relic could be taken safely only if its name was spoken, and its direction was set by all 5 active ward marks. It was not a weapon for one person. It was a bond piece made to work only when several trusted hands guided it together. Kael looked around at his team, and for a heartbeat he saw the truth of his own change. He did not need to carry everything alone anymore. He gave the order to Sarah, Max, Raven, Ember, and Silas, and each one took a place around the relic site. Sarah set the north mark with steady hands. Max held the east point and kept the enemy back. Raven, though still guarded, traced the west sign with surprising skill. Silas spoke the old seal words in a trembling but clear voice. Ember pressed a warm wing over the south mark, and its light made the cracks in the bone band glow brighter. Kael then spoke the final name, the one Silas said would tell the relic it had been claimed by the living instead of the dark. The ground shook harder, and the enemy soldiers pulled back in fear as a pale wave of light spread across the path. The broken seal did not open. It held. The hidden trap collapsed inward on itself, and the enemy line was forced to retreat, stumbling into the trees as Victor had to abandon this first move. Kael took the relic in both hands, and the moment it settled, he felt a cold pulse run through the stone like a warning. Somewhere far beyond the trees, a horn sounded once from the direction of the forbidden abyss, and Victor knew the relic had been found. Kael stood in the mist with his team around him, breathing hard, not triumphant yet, but stronger than before. He had learned the shape of trust in the middle of danger, and now the path ahead had changed. The fortress was still standing, the relic was in hand, and the next step would lead them closer to the abyss, where Victor was already preparing something far worse than another ambush. Kael looked into the dark road ahead, and for the first time, he did not see it as a place to survive alone. He saw it as a place where a united team might still win against the night if they could stay together long enough to reach the truth. Night pressed down on the fortress walls, and the wind moved through broken stone like a low warning. Below the battlements, the burial path waited in silence, narrow and cold, with black soil, old posts, and dead trees lining the road like silent guards. Kael stood at the edge of that path with the ward mark bone band wrapped in cloth inside his hand, and he knew the next march would not be a simple travel through dark land. It would be a test of trust, because Victor was already ahead in the shadows, preparing something that could open the forbidden abyss and unleash power that no one could safely hold. Kael was a man with black hair, sharp gray eyes, and worn dark armor that carried the marks of many hard days. His long black cloak moved behind him in the wind, and his face stayed hard, but there was a new strain in his eyes now. He had spent too long surviving by himself, and that habit had nearly broken the group before. Yet now he looked at Sarah, Max, Ember, Lady Raven, and Silas, and he understood something simple and strange. If he kept pushing them away, Victor would win without another battle. Sarah stood near him with her blonde hair tied back and her steel blue cloak pulled tight around her light armor. She was a disciplined soldier with clear blue eyes, and she wanted one thing above all else, which was to keep the others alive long enough to stop Victor. Max waited beside the broken gate, broad-shouldered and hard-faced, his brown hair damp with mist, his scarred chin set in anger and duty. He wanted revenge for the harm Victor had caused, but he also wanted order, because he knew a broken line of fighters could not survive what came next. Ember hovered close to Kael like a living ember in the night, its dark red scales catching the little light that remained, its ember-orange eyes sharp with fierce intelligence. The dragon spirit beast did not speak with human words, but its presence gave courage, and it mattered because the old seals of the land responded to its power. Lady Raven stood a little apart, her black hair falling against a silver mask, her long black dress moving in careful layers beneath a hidden dagger belt. She had come as a messenger before, but her true reason was now clearer, because she knew more about Victor than she had first admitted, and she wanted to see the end of his plans before his greed swallowed everything. Silas, the thin gray-haired keeper of old seal lore, leaned on a staff carved with faded symbols. His sunken eyes carried the weight of many secrets, and he mattered because he had once helped build the wards around the abyss. He had not come for glory, he had come because he feared what would happen if the seals failed in the wrong order. Together they were not a perfect team, but they were a real one, and that was enough to begin. They left the fortress before dawn, moving in a tight line along the burial path while the sky stayed black and heavy. Every step felt like a choice. The black soil gave way under their boots, and the stone posts on either side of the road carried old seal marks that had been scratched and worn by time. Silas pointed to each mark as they passed, explaining in simple words that the path had been built long ago to guide people toward the sealed ground without letting the buried force stir too soon. He said the wardmark bone band was not just an object of power. It was a key made to be held by several trusted hands at once, so one greedy person could not control the lock alone. That mattered because Victor had built his whole plan around control. He did not want the abyss destroyed. He wanted it opened in a way that would let him command whatever slept below. That was why he had sent ambushes, spread lies, and hunted the relic. He needed the seal broken in the correct pattern, and he believed fear would force the others to bring him what he wanted. The road grew worse as they went. Dead trees leaned over the path, their bare branches scratching the sky, and cold mist rolled between the roots like breath from under the earth. At a bend in the road, they found signs of a fresh struggle. Black marks scorched the stones, and broken seal stones had been stacked into a small warning pile. Max knelt and touched the marks, then looked up with a grim face. Victor had been here recently, and he had tested the defenses without fully breaking through. Sarah studied the ground and said the attack had a purpose. It was not just a threat, it was a signal. Victor was measuring how fast they could move and how much pressure they could survive. That realization made the air feel tighter. Kael closed his fingers around the wrapped bone band and felt a faint pulse from inside it, as if the relic recognized the path and wanted to be used. Ember reacted at once, wings lifting, orange eyes flaring bright. Silas stepped back and whispered that the bone items were waking because the abyss was near. He said there were more than rings and bands in the old set. There was also a carved mask, and when all the pieces were brought together by the wrong hands, they could bend attacks, weaken seals, and distort the way power moved through a fight. This was the first clear twist in the journey. The relic was not only a tool for defense, it was also part of the same system Victor wanted to corrupt. The group had not been carrying a simple treasure. They had been carrying a lock and a danger at the same time. That truth changed everything. Kael had to admit that he had been thinking like a lone fighter for too long. He asked Sarah to lead the front with Max because her calm eyes could spot traps before they swallowed the road. He asked Lady Raven to stay near the rear because her sharp gaze and quiet steps made her best at seeing what followed them. He asked Silas to keep the relic covered until they reached the next seal post, where the bone band could be checked against the old carvings. Then he surprised the others by placing Ember on his shoulder rather than in front of him, trusting the dragon's spirit to sense hidden power in the ground. That small act mattered because it showed Kael was no longer trying to control every step. He was learning to use the strength of the group instead of fighting beside it in silence. Even Max, who had trusted few people after the fortress struggle, gave a short nod of approval. He had wanted Kael to prove he could lead without shutting everyone out, and now he was seeing it happen in real time. They reached the next seal post as the sky began to pale at the edge of morning. The stone marker stood half sunk in the earth with the carved symbol of a closed eye on its front and deep cracks running through its base. Silas examined it with shaking hands and said the seal was still active, but it had been strained by someone outside. Victor had not broken through yet, but he had pressed against it hard enough to leave a mark. Lady Raven then did something that surprised even Kael. She removed her silver mask for the first time, revealing tired eyes and a face that held both fear and resolve. She told them that Victor had not always served as a simple enemy from afar. He had once studied the same old records she had, and he believed the power under the abyss could be controlled if fear, loyalty, and sacrifice were arranged in the right order. He He did not want chaos. He wanted a world where no one could challenge him because he would hold the one force that made kings and generals obey. That made him more dangerous than a common raider. He was patient, educated, and convinced that his cruelty was necessary. As Raven spoke, Ember suddenly lifted its head and hissed low toward the tree line. A faint glow appeared between the dead branches, and then a small group of victors masked sentries emerged from the mist. They moved fast and silent, with metal hooks and seal knives meant to capture rather than kill. Their goal was clear. They wanted the relic, and they wanted to drag one of the group back as leverage. Sarah gave the order to hold the line, and Max charged forward with brute force and controlled anger, breaking their formation long enough for Kael and Ember to guard the relic. The clash that followed was sharp and fast, full of motion and shadow, but it stayed clean and focused. No one fell, no one was lost. Instead, the team began to move as one. Sarah cut off the first flanking path. Max drove the second group back. Raven slipped behind a sentry and seized the hook chain with quick precision. Silas struck the ground with his staff and woke a narrow seal flare that sent a wave of white light across the road. Ember answered with a burst of hot wing light that scattered the last attackers into retreat. But the attack had been planned for a deeper reason, and Kael saw that at once. One of the sentries had not been there to win. He had been there to place a black marker stone beside the seal post, and that stone was now pulsing with Victor's signal. Silas snatched it up, but his face turned pale. He said Victor was using the markers to measure every seal on the burial path, mapping the whole route to the Forbidden Abyss. If the final marker was placed correctly, Victor would know the exact point where the old barrier could be bent without fully snapping. That meant the battle was no longer only about surviving the night. It was now about reaching the abyss before Victor finished preparing the last piece of his ritual. Kael looked to the dark horizon beyond the dead trees, and for the first time, he felt the weight of leadership settle into place. He did not need to know everything yet. He only needed to keep the group moving, keep them honest, and keep them together long enough to learn the truth. The road then turned downward, and the air became colder, as if the earth itself was breathing through a crack. Far ahead, beyond the dead trees and the broken stone, a low, dark shape began to rise from the mist. It was the edge of the Forbidden Abyss, wide and silent, with black rock around it and a stillness that felt older than any fortress wall. Ember trembled in the air above Kael's shoulder, not from fear alone, but from the pressure of sleeping power. Silas whispered that the seals here were not built to keep one monster out. They were built to keep many things in, and if Victor had learned the wrong order, he could use the bone relic to turn the whole system against itself. Kael tightened his grip on the wrapped ward-marked bone band, then looked at Sarah, Max, Raven, Silas, and Ember. They were tired, stained with travel, and surrounded by a land that wanted them to turn back, yet none of them did. Victor was close, the abyss was near, and the truth was waiting somewhere below. So Kael took one more step forward, and the others followed him into the cold shadow, ready to face what the darkness had hidden for far too long. The cold shadow of the burial path stretched ahead like a dead road that never wanted visitors, and the air near the Forbidden Abyss felt older than stone, heavier than fear, and silent in a way that made every breath sound loud. Kael walked first, with his black hair damp from mist, his worn dark armor tight across his strong frame, and his long black cloak dragging over broken ground. He kept the wrapped ward-marked bone band in one hand, because Silas had warned him that the band could either guide the seals or wake them in the wrong way. Behind him came Commander Sarah, a woman with blonde hair, clear blue eyes, and a soldier stance that never broke even when her legs were shaking. Captain Max followed next, a broad man with brown hair, a scar across his chin, and the hard stare of someone who had seen too many bad orders. Lady Raven moved like a quiet blade, a woman with black hair, pale skin, and a silver mask that hid most of her face while her sharp eyes watched every stone. Silas came after her, a thin man with gray hair, sunken eyes, and a robe covered in old seal symbols, because he knew more about this place than anyone else. Ember floated above and beside them, a living dragon spirit beast with dark red scales, ember orange eyes, and translucent wings that gave off a faint glow in the dark. The danger was simple and clear now. If Lord Victor reached the heart of the abyss first, he could use the bone relics to force the ancient seal system to obey him, and that would let him turn the whole underground prison into his own weapon. Kael knew they had to stop him, not only to save themselves, but to keep the whole land from being open to a darkness that had slept for generations. They did not travel far before the land answered back. Stone posts along the burial path stood crooked on both sides of the road, and each post had broken seal marks cut into its face. Some marks still held a faint light, while others had been scraped clean, as if someone had tried to erase the old warnings. Silas stopped near one post and placed a shaking hand on the carved lines. He told them that this path had once belonged to the seal keepers, and that it was built to guide trusted hands toward the abyss while blocking greedy ones from passing. He also explained the most dangerous part of the system. The seals were not just locks, but a living chain of linked marks that reacted to fear, intent, and bloodline memory. If one part was forced open by the wrong relic, the rest could turn inward and attack the people trying to protect them. That was why Victor wanted the bone relics so badly. He did not want power only for himself. He wanted control over the whole system, because if he could make the seals obey him, then no one could stop him from taking the hidden force below. Ember gave a low, angry growl, and the glowing cracks in its body brightened as it sensed the pressure in the ground. Sarah drew closer to Kael and asked him if he still trusted the band in his hand. Kael looked down at the ward-marked bone band, then said that trust was not the same as comfort, and that they had come too far to turn away now. Before anyone could answer, a deep pulse moved under the road, and the nearest stone post split open with a sharp crack. Black dust spilled out, and a narrow seal gate rose from the ground like a hidden jaw opening for the first time in years. The gate did not open for free. Instead, 3 bone rings slid from slots in the stone and began to spin around one another, each one glowing with a faint white line. Silas went pale and whispered that Victor had already reached the lower chambers and had awakened the old trial system. The rings were not weapons in the usual way. They were judgment tools made to test whether a group could move forward without breaking their bond. If the rings sensed lies, fear, or selfish intent, they would slam shut and seal the path for hours. Kael stepped forward and wrapped the ward-mark bone band around both hands, then held it out so Sarah, Max, Raven, and Silas could touch it together. He told them that they had to move as one because the relic would only work if the people holding it accepted the same purpose. Sarah nodded first, then Max placed his hand on the band with a rough breath, Raven touched it with careful fingers, and Silas followed with clear relief. Ember lowered its body close enough that one glowing wing brushed the relic, and the spinning rings paused for a moment as if listening. Then the path filled with a cold white light, and the gate opened just enough for them to pass. But the moment they stepped through, the floor changed beneath them. The burial path dipped into a tunnel lined with old bone markers, and every marker showed a different seal symbol, some made to hold power, some made to release it, and some made to redirect it. Kael understood then that the old keepers had not built one wall against the abyss. They had built a whole system of choices, and Victor was trying to break every choice at once. Deeper in the tunnel, they found the first sign that Victor was near. A set of polished dark gloves lay on the ground beside a smashed lantern, and the stone around them had been scraped by something sharp and forceful. Lady Raven knelt to inspect the marks and said that Victor had not come alone. He had brought seal breakers, hired agents trained to clear the path and trigger old defenses for him. Max cursed under his breath and said that Victor always liked other people to take the risks first. Kael said nothing, but his jaw tightened as he saw a line of fresh dust leading toward a side chamber sealed with bone plates. Silas reached the plates and recognized the marks at once. He said that the chamber was a memory vault, a place where the seal keepers stored the truth about the abyss, including the reason it was forbidden in the first place. Kael pushed the plates open, and the group stepped into a round room lined with bone shelves and faded wall carvings. At the center stood a broken pedestal, and around it were etched images of the bone relics being split apart and carried to different hidden sites. One carving showed a silver-haired nobleman with a cold face, and Silas spoke Victor's name with a stunned voice. The carving proved something none of them had expected. Victor was not trying to create a new power. He was trying to reassemble a failed control system that the old seal keepers had buried on purpose. Long ago, the abyss had not been sealed only because it was dangerous. It had been sealed because it could react to the wrong ruler and amplify a single cruel will into a force that could command the entire underground network. Victor had learned this truth and wanted to use it because he believed the world needed one absolute hand to stop chaos. In his mind, order mattered more than freedom, and fear was a fair price if it created control. That belief made him more dangerous than a simple thief because he truly thought he was saving the world by owning it. The room shook before Kael could answer the weight of that truth. A deep voice echoed through the stone, calm and polished, and Victor stepped through a torn opening in the far wall with 3 masked followers behind him. Victor was a man with silver hair, pale skin, narrow eyes, and a red noble coat with gold trim that still looked clean despite the dust around him. Dark gloves covered his hands, and his high collar made him look like a king in a place that hated kings. He smiled as if he had expected them all along. He said the old seals had always belonged to the strong, and that weak keepers had only delayed the inevitable. Then he pointed at Kael and said the Wardmark bone band was the missing link. It could bind the system, but only if used by someone willing to command it without hesitation. Kael answered that Victor wanted to command everything because he was afraid of anything he could not control. Victor laughed softly and said fear was wisdom because unchecked freedom always led to ruin. Then his followers raised bone shards and sent a wave of seal force through the room. The carvings lit up, the pedestal split, and the floor erupted into moving lines of white light that tried to trap the team in separate circles. Sarah shouted for the others to stay close. Max slammed his armored shoulder into one glowing line and broke it long enough for Raven to slip through and cut down the closest follower with a hidden strike that sent him stumbling backward. Ember flared bright and drove a burst of heat across the room, forcing 2 more followers to retreat while Silas grabbed the edge of the broken pedestal and shouted that the room was reacting to Victor's name, not just his tools. That meant the old system still recognized him as a possible master, which made the threat even worse. Kael felt the Wardmark bone band pull in his hands like it was waking up, and at that same instant he saw a new carving shine on the far wall. It showed not Victor but Kael standing before the abyss with the band in his grip. The twist hit him hard and clear. The relic had not chosen him by accident. It had been waiting for a person willing to carry the burden without trying to own it. Kael understood then that the real fight was not only against Victor. It was also against the part of the system that wanted a ruler at any cost, because if he used the band selfishly, he could become exactly what Victor already was. The battle shifted at once and the room became a test of will rather than strength. Kael told Sarah, Max, Raven, and Silas to split their focus and hold the pattern together, not to win each clash alone. Sarah moved first, her blonde hair flying as she guided the group like a battlefield commander and kept their pace steady. Max blocked a spinning seal blade with his armored forearm and drove it into the floor with a grunt of effort. Raven slipped between glowing lines, her black hair hidden under her mask and cloak, and reached the side runes that controlled the room. Silas, though tired and shaking, read the old symbols aloud and warned them which marks would collapse if struck wrong. Ember circled above them, its ember-orange eyes bright with loyalty, and it shielded Kael whenever Victor sent a strike toward the center. Victor watched the team work together, and for the first time his calm face tightened. He realized he could not easily split them. That angered him because his entire plan depended on isolated fear. He forced more power into the floor, and the room began to sink into a lower chamber below the memory vault. Kael reacted fast, pressing the Wardmark bone band against the central seal line and speaking the only truth that mattered in that moment. He said the seals were made to protect people, not crowns. The band flashed once, then spread a ring of steady white light across the floor. Victor staggered back as his own seal force rebounded against him, and his followers were driven into retreat by the backlash. But the chamber had already started to open, and a deep draft rose from below, carrying a cold, ancient smell that came from the true heart of the forbidden abyss. Kael looked down into the widening dark and knew they had reached the edge of something far larger than a hidden tunnel. Victor was still nearby, still dangerous, and now the abyss itself was awake. Sarah moved beside Kael, Max set his stance, Raven watched the shadows, Silas whispered a warning about the lower seals, and Ember gave one sharp cry as the path into the darkness opened again. Together they stepped forward, not because they felt safe, but because the truth had finally come into view and it was waiting below them. Cold air rose from the deep path, and the fortress above felt far away now. The burial path ended at a hidden stone gate, half buried in black soil and old bones. Kael stood at the front, his black hair damp, his gray eyes fixed ahead, and his worn armor scratched by every step he had survived. Sarah, a blonde woman with a soldier-built frame, stayed close at his side because she trusted his mind even when the world turned cruel. Max, a broad man with brown hair and a hard stare, guarded the rear with a hand on his weapon, while Raven, a black-haired woman in a silver mask, watched the dark corners for any sign of betrayal. Salas, a thin gray-haired man in a robe marked with seal symbols, pressed his palm to the gate and whispered that the lower seals were not broken by accident. He said Victor had learned the old truth, and that the Abyss was not a monster to command, but a prison holding back a hunger that could spread upward through the land. Ember, the young dragon spirit with dark red scales and ember eyes, gave a sharp cry and flared its translucent wings, as if it could feel the prison stirring beneath them. Then the gate opened, not with force but with recognition, and 3 bone rings lifted into the air, turning slowly like a test. Victor stepped from the shadow beyond the gate, silver hair shining cold in the dark, his red coat neat as ever, his face calm and cruel. He smiled and said he had not come to destroy the seals, but to control them because a locked abyss still held power, and power could build a kingdom faster than fear ever could. Kael finally understood the twist hidden in the chase. Victor was not serving the darkness. He was trying to use its prison as a throne. That truth changed everything because it meant the real danger was not only what slept below, but what a greedy man would do with it. Sarah moved first, Max followed, and Raven cut away Victor's recent path with a quiet strike that drove him back. Kael took the ward-marked bone band from Sila's, and with Ember circling above, the group joined hands around the seal lines. The rings slowed, the gate locked onto their unity, and the memory vault rose from the floor behind Victor like a hidden chamber waking after years of silence. Inside, they found the records that Silas had guarded in shame, and Kael saw the final truth. The seals had been built by people who once feared their own power more than the Abyss itself. Kael did not break that legacy. He chose to protect it, and to protect his friends with it. When Victor lunged for the vault, the awakened seals crushed his advance, and he was forced to retreat into the dark, empty-handed and furious. The Abyss fell silent again, and Kael stood changed, no longer only a fighter, but the keeper of a truth that had finally found the light.